It's 1978. Somewhere on a steep grade in Colorado, a loaded dump truck is crawling uphill at barely 35 miles per hour. The engine is screaming at over 4,000 RPM. Oil temperature is rising. Coolant pressure is climbing. The driver's foot is buried in the throttle. And still, the truck keeps pulling. No knocking, no overheating, no drama, just torque. The driver glances at his gauges. Oil pressure steady at 45 psi. Water temperature holding at 210. He's been climbing for the last 18 minutes. Behind him, 22,000 pounds of gravel shifts slightly as the truck rounds a hairpin curve, and the engine just keeps going. But what almost nobody knows is the engine doing all of this wasn't a big block 454. It wasn't even the legendary 427. It was something most Americans have never even heard of. The Chevy 366 tall deck. And the truth is, General Motors never wanted you to care about it. Because this wasn't an engine built for muscle cars. It wasn't built for drag strips or Daytona glory. It wasn't designed to make teenage boys stare at magazine covers. It was built for something far more brutal. Endless miles, full throttle climbs, 20,000-pound loads, 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Most people think they know Chevrolet's engine story. The small blocks get all the attention. The 350, the 327, the 302, names that echo through car shows like sacred scripture. But hiding in the background, working while everyone else was racing, was a workhorse that quietly outlived them all. An engine so overbuilt, so stubbornly durable, that it became the backbone of American industry for nearly 3 decades, and yet it was ignored. To understand why, you have to go back to the late 1960s. At the time, Chevrolet was dominating performance headlines with engines like the 396 and the 427. Magazine covers featured screaming big blocks. America was drunk on horsepower. But behind the scenes, fleet managers across the country were filing complaints. Warranty claims stacking up faster than GM's accountants could process them. Their medium-duty trucks were eating engines alive. High RPM under load was the killer. A normal big block might survive weekend drag runs. Those were short bursts, controlled chaos. But try pulling 18,000 pounds uphill for hours at a time, and things got ugly fast. Oil pressure would drop, rod bearings would flatten. Mechanics across the country started opening up engines with crank journals scored so badly they looked sandblasted. Main caps would show signs of walking. One GM engineer reportedly said, "We weren't building engines. We were building time bombs with nice paint jobs." Fleet operators were furious. These weren't weekend toys. These were revenue generators. Some operators reported going through 3 engines in 2 years. Chevrolet had a crisis on their hands. And that's when they decided to do something radical. Instead of redesigning an engine from scratch, they took the Mark IV big block platform and stretched it vertically, literally. The result was what became known as the tall deck block. The deck height was increased from the standard 9.8 inches to a massive 10.2 inches. That's 4/10 of an inch. It doesn't sound like much on paper, but inside, it changed everything. With a 4.00-inch bore and a 3.76-inch stroke, the 366 cubic inch displacement wasn't impressive by muscle car standards. Compression ratios were typically kept low, around 8.01 to 8.5.1. Horsepower ratings ranged from about 235 to 300 horsepower, numbers that would make any drag racer yawn. But torque, upwards of 375 to 400 pound-feet. At barely 1,600 to 2,000 RPM, peak torque at idle plus speeds. Before most engines even wake up, the 366 was already doing its best work. That kind of low-end grunt meant trucks didn't need to scream to move. They could lug, crawl, climb, pull. Drivers reported being able to start from a dead stop on steep hills without riding the clutch. The torque was just there, waiting. But there was a problem. That taller deck required longer push rods, which meant different rocker arm geometry, which meant a wider intake manifold, which meant almost none of the standard passenger car big block parts would fit. You couldn't just bolt on a Holly carb from your Chevelle, you couldn't swap in a high-rise intake from your Camaro. Even the pistons were unique, designed with a taller compression height to match the longer cylinder walls. This wasn't just a truck engine, it was a truck-only ecosystem, and that made hot rodders hate it. Parts availability was non-existent outside of GM fleet channels. Machine shops didn't want to work on them. Speed shops wouldn't stock components. The 366 became an orphan in the performance world. Still, Chevrolet didn't care, because what they discovered during development changed everything. By increasing the deck height, engineers were able to use longer connecting rods. Specifically, they went from the standard 6.135-inch rod to a 6.535-inch unit. That improved the rod-to-stroke ratio significantly. Why does that matter? A better rod-to-stroke ratio reduces side loading on the cylinder walls. When a piston travels up and down, the connecting rod angles slightly as it rotates around the crankshaft. That angle creates lateral pressure against the cylinder wall. Short rods mean sharper angles, more friction, more heat, more wear. Longer rods mean gentler angles, less friction, less wear over time. In real-world fleet testing, some early 366 prototypes ran over 200,000 miles under full commercial loads, without a rebuild. Trucks driven hard every single day by drivers who didn't baby them. That was unheard of in 1970, but durability wasn't the only issue engineers tackled. Cooling had always been a weak point in working big blocks. The Siamese cylinder walls ran hot under sustained load, so the 366 featured improved coolant passages around those critical areas. Engineers added strategic channels that directed more flow to the hottest spots. But the biggest change was in the oiling system. Oil galleries were completely revised to prioritize main bearing lubrication before feeding the valve train. In a standard big block, oil flow split fairly evenly between the bottom end and the top end. But under sustained high RPM load, the valve train was stealing oil that the crankshaft desperately needed. The 366's solution was simple. Feed the crank first. Everything else, second. At sustained 4,000 RPM under load, oil starvation would destroy a conventional 396 in less than an hour. But the 366's revised oiling system kept pressure stable even during long uphill pulls with gross vehicle weights exceeding 25,000 pounds. One fleet mechanic in Ohio later recalled opening up a 366 after 150,000 miles of dump truck service. The bearings still had factory machining marks on them, he said. We only opened it up because the boss wanted to see what was going on in there. They buttoned it back up and put it back to work. It ran another 80,000 miles before the truck itself was retired. But if it was that good, why didn't anyone talk about it? Because it was slow. Quarter-mile times in a loaded medium-duty truck? Somewhere north of 25 seconds. Top speed? Maybe 70 miles per hour downhill with a tailwind? Meanwhile, muscle cars were running low 13s. Some even dipping into the 12s by the early 70s. Nobody wanted to brag about an engine that could haul gravel better than it could win races. There were no 366 posters on bedroom walls, no songs written about the tall deck, just work orders, mileage logs, maintenance schedules. The 366 was the engine equivalent of a lunch pail and work boots, respected by those who used it, invisible to everyone else. And then, emissions regulations hit. The Clean Air Act changes in the early 1970s killed high-compression performance engines almost overnight. Horsepower numbers plummeted, muscle cars became jokes. But the 366, it was already designed for low compression and long-term durability. While performance engines were dying painful deaths, the tall deck kept working. Chevrolet offered it in medium-duty platforms like the C50 and C60 series trucks throughout the 70s and 80s. delivery vehicles, school buses, construction haulers, garbage trucks. In some configurations, these engines ran 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, for over a decade. Do the math. That's over 30,000 hours of operation. At an average of 2,500 RPM, that's more than 4.5 billion crankshaft revolutions without catastrophic failure. Billion, with a B, and yet, there was still one more twist. In the late 1980s, some racing teams experimented with tall deck blocks for endurance applications. The extra deck height allowed for custom rod and piston combinations that improved high RPM stability. Some engine builders reported spinning these blocks to 7,000 RPM with the right components. A few drag racers even explored using tall deck architecture for blown alcohol applications. But again, there was a catch. The thicker cylinder walls that made the 366 durable also made it heavy. Really heavy. Some tall deck blocks tipped the scales at nearly 50 pounds more than their passenger car counterparts. In racing, weight is the enemy. So while the design had potential, it never caught on outside industrial or marine applications. A few boat builders loved it. Some agricultural equipment manufacturers specified it, but mainstream racing never happened. The 366 remained what it had always been, a working engine, not a racing engine. By the early 1990s, newer fuel-injected platforms were beginning to replace carbureted workhorses. Electronic controls allowed for better fuel atomization and cleaner emissions. The old-school tall deck was starting to look like a relic. Fleet managers who had sworn by the 366 for 20 years were reluctantly switching to newer platforms, not because they were better, but because they met tightening emissions standards. Production slowly tapered off. Tooling was retired. The last tall deck blocks rolled off the line without ceremony. And just like that, the engine that powered thousands of school buses, delivery trucks, and municipal fleets quietly disappeared. No farewell tour, no collector mania, just silence. Today, you can still find 366 tall deck engines running in farm trucks across rural America. In small towns where equipment doesn't get replaced unless it has to be. Some have over 300,000 miles on the original bottom end. A few have crossed 400,000. Still running on the original bearings, still making torque. Try that with a high-strung muscle car V8 from the same era. You'd be lucky to get 60,000 before the bottom end scattered. So what made this story so wild? It wasn't horsepower, it wasn't quarter-mile times, it was engineering priorities. The 366 was built to survive conditions that would destroy most performance engines in weeks. Longer rods, revised oiling, improved cooling, low compression, everything focused on one goal. Don't win races, finish the job, go home at the end of the day, get up tomorrow and do it again. There's something almost philosophical about that. In a world obsessed with peak numbers and bragging rights, the 366 represented a different kind of excellence. Not the excellence of being fastest, the excellence of being most reliable, the excellence of still being there when everything else has broken down. Today, only a small community of truck enthusiasts even remember the tall deck. They swap stories online about engines with impossible mileage. They remember. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of America's most overlooked workhorse engines, let me know what you want to see next. Another forgotten truck motor, a racing legend, or something in between. Because there are more stories like this one. Engines that never got the glory they deserved. Stories hiding under the hood. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.